The third time the gate flashed access denied, I didn't panic. I exhaled quietly, like someone watching the final piece fall into place. This wasn't my defeat. It was the springing of a trap 6 months in the making. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because some stories deserve to be heard. It was a crisp autumn morning when I first noticed the shift. My name's Ethan, and I was repairing the eastern fence of my ranch, the side facing Oak Ridge, a collection of cookie-cutter homes with manicured lawns that had sprung up 5 years ago adjacent to my property. The contrast between their uniform perfection and my sprawling, somewhat wild 5 acres couldn't have been more stark. My phone chimed. Subject line: urgent, updated regulations regarding shared road usage and access control. My stomach tightened as I opened it, still standing beside my half-finished fence repair. This land meant everything to me. After leaving my position at Wesley Construction, I'd purchased this ranch as a fresh start. Elizabeth and I had fallen in love with the space, the freedom, and those sunset views from the back porch. We'd planned to grow old here together, watching seasons change from our rocking chairs. But cancer took her 2 years ago, far too quickly, leaving me alone with our dreams and this land that now felt simultaneously too empty and the only place I could breathe. The Oak Ridge development had been completed shortly after we moved in. Though initially I tried to be neighborly, the HOA president, Patricia Henderson, had made it increasingly clear that my ranch was considered an eyesore, disrupting their carefully cultivated community aesthetic. Reading through the email, my concern deepened. The Homeowners Association was claiming authority over the private access road that led to my ranch, the only way in or out of my property. According to these clarified regulations, they were implementing community-wide access controls for enhanced security and property value preservation. The email mentioned plans for an electronic gate system. What it didn't mention was how this would affect my daily access to my own home, or the fact that the road in question was actually on my property according to my deed. I called Dave Miller, my closest neighbor and probably the only genuine friend I had in the community. Within 30 minutes, he was sitting on my porch, beer in hand, discussing the implications. "It's not just about the road," Dave explained, taking a swig from his bottle. "There's talk about Veritech buying up land in the area for some kind of upscale commercial complex. Word is they've been courting the county commissioners for months. Dave, a former police officer who now ran an auto repair shop, had connections throughout local government and always seemed to know what was happening before it hit public channels. As we talked, I recalled the numerous small conflicts I'd had with Patricia over the years, complaints about my chickens being unsanitary, my vegetable garden having unsightly tall plants, and the occasional parking of my truck in view of the community entrance, which decreases curb appeal. Each incident had been a minor annoyance, but pieced together, they formed a pattern of harassment that now seemed to have a more calculated purpose. "I think you should attend the HOA meeting next week," Dave suggested. "They're planning to officially announce the security upgrades. Might be worth hearing directly." I normally avoided community gatherings. The pitying looks and awkward conversations about Elizabeth still hurt too much. But this situation warranted making an exception. The following Thursday evening, I entered the Oak Ridge Community Center for the first time in over a year. The room felt noticeably quieter as I took a seat in the back row. Several residents glanced in my direction with expressions ranging from surprise to curiosity. Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who had brought Elizabeth homemade soup during her final months, offered a gentle smile that momentarily warmed the cold atmosphere. Patricia, immaculately dressed in a tailored blazer that screamed authority, barely acknowledged my presence with a tight-lipped nod before beginning the meeting. Her perfectly manicured fingernails tapped impatiently on the podium as she waited for the murmurs about my appearance to subside. The main agenda item was the exciting Security Enhancement Initiative, featuring an electronic gate system with personalized access cards for all residents. As Patricia spoke, her voice carried the practiced enthusiasm of a saleswoman closing a deal, her eyes occasionally drifting toward me to gauge my reaction. When question time arrived, I raised my hand. I'm curious about the legal basis for installing gates on what appears to be a private access road, particularly one that affects non-HOA property owners, I said, keeping my voice level and professional. Patricia's smile didn't waver, though her eyes hardened. The community access road falls under HOA jurisdiction, according to the original development plans. We've had our legal team review everything thoroughly. Her dismissal was clear and immediate. Now, moving on to the landscaping committee report. But not before I noticed a man in the back corner, someone I didn't recognize, exchange a significant glance with Patricia. As the meeting concluded, I lingered, observing rather than participating in the small talk. The unknown man approached Patricia, speaking in hushed tones. His expensive suit and commanding presence marked him as someone of importance. I caught the name badge on his lapel, Greg Johnson, Veritech Development. The pieces were beginning to align in a way that made me increasingly uneasy. On my way out, Robert Williams, one of the older HOA board members, deliberately brushed past me. "You should be careful," he murmured, just loudly enough for me to hear. "They're targeting you." Before I could ask what he meant, he had moved on, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I pulled out all my property documents, deeds, surveys, original sale agreements, spreading them across my dining table. The weathered oak surface that Elizabeth and I had found at a country auction now held what might be the key to saving our dream. After 3 hours of careful reading, squinting under the warm glow of the kitchen pendant light Elizabeth had insisted would make the space feel like home, I discovered something I had overlooked. The access road wasn't merely my property. It was part of an original historical easement with specific legal provisions dating back to when the county roads were first established. I couldn't believe I had missed this detail for 5 years. The road to my ranch wasn't just private property. It was potentially the key to a much bigger issue that Patricia had no idea existed. As the realization dawned, I found myself laughing for the first time in weeks. The sound echoed in the empty farmhouse. The following morning, I called Sarah Thompson, a local attorney specializing in real estate law. Her small office above the town's only coffee shop was cluttered but organized, much like her approach to legal matters. "This is fascinating, Ethan," she said, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed my documents. "The easement rights here are unusually specific. According to this, the access road isn't just privately owned by you. It's technically a historic right-of-way with perpetual access provisions." She pointed to a clause in the original deed that I had highlighted. "This means they can't legally restrict your access without your explicit permission, regardless of any HOA bylaws they create after the fact." I leaned forward, tapping the old boundary map. "There's more. Look at this section here. The road was originally part of the county's historic route system. When the land was subdivided for the Oak Ridge development, there was a special provision that the original ranch owner, now me, would maintain control of the access point." Sarah's eyes widened. "This could be significant. We should research the complete history of the property at the county records office." What I discovered there was revealing. The current HOA properties had all been carved from the original farmland that included my ranch. The developer had sold off the residential parcels but maintained specific covenants regarding the access road, covenants that had transferred to me when I purchased the property. Most significantly, I found an easement clause stating that the right-of-ways could not be altered without the explicit consent of the ranch owner. While digging through these records, I also came across recent permit applications from Veritech Development, plans for a luxury mixed-use complex that would require access through what was currently Oak Ridge, with a specific notation about resolving access issues with adjacent agricultural property. The blueprint clearly showed a widened road cutting right through where my ranch house currently stood. The timeline indicated they hoped to begin construction within 8 months, which explained the sudden urgency of the gate installation. They weren't just trying to inconvenience me. They were systematically creating conditions that would force me to sell. Dave proved invaluable during this investigation phase, using his connections and natural talent for blending in. He began observing Patricia's movements and reported back that she was having regular meetings with Greg Johnson from Veritech at a restaurant 20 miles away, far enough to avoid local gossip. With Dave's help, I also set up a private conversation with Robert Williams, recording it with his permission. The board doesn't know everything, Robert confessed, his voice low despite us being alone in his garden. Patricia has been holding separate meetings with select members. They've been discussing what they call the old ranch problem for months. There's a lot of money involved, Ethan. Veritech has promised significant community improvements if the deal goes through. Armed with this information, I returned to Sarah's office to develop a strategy. She spread the documents across her desk, thinking aloud. What we have here is extraordinary, Ethan. According to these original documents, when the developers sold the parcels that became Oak Ridge, they retained control of the access road as a historic easement, control that transferred to you when you bought the ranch. But here's the key point. You don't just own the road to your ranch. Based on these boundary descriptions and easement rights, you actually control the entire access point to the Oak Ridge community itself. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. I stared at her, processing the implications. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Sarah's expression was both serious and slightly amused. Ethan, they can't lock you out, but you could legally lock them out. She quickly added, of course, I'm not suggesting you actually do that, but it gives us significant leverage. This revelation changed everything. What had begun as a defensive investigation to protect my property now revealed a powerful counter-strategy. If Patricia and Veritech wanted to play hardball, I now had the means to respond in kind. I didn't want to disrupt my neighbors' lives. Most of them were simply families caught in Patricia's power games. But I needed to protect my home and the future Elizabeth and I had planned here. What's our next move? I asked Sarah, feeling a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't just about an annoying HOA president anymore. It was about standing up to corporate bullying and manipulation. First, we need to formally establish your legal control of the access road through the proper channels, but quietly, Sarah advised. We'll file the necessary paperwork with the county to clarify the easement rights. Then we wait and observe. Let them continue with their gate plan for now. It's better if they don't realize what we know until we're ready to act. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I meticulously crafted our legal strategy, weighing every risk and potential outcome. We decided on a phased approach. First, legally solidify my ownership of the access road through formal documentation. Second, gather evidence of the HOA's actions and intentions. And finally, prepare for a definitive confrontation when the time was right. I approached Robert again, this time more directly, asking him to keep me informed about the HOA's internal discussions. Though nervous, he agreed, troubled by the secretive nature of Patricia's leadership. Dave helped me install security cameras around my property and along the access road, positioned discreetly to avoid drawing attention. I began attending HOA meetings regularly, adopting a facade of cooperative interest in the community's security upgrades. I even volunteered to join the security committee, much to Patricia's poorly concealed suspicion. It's good to see you taking an interest in community matters, Ethan, she said after one meeting, her smile not reaching her eyes. We've been concerned about your isolation since Elizabeth passed. The mention of my wife's name from her lips felt like a violation, but I maintained my composure, knowing that my apparent compliance was part of a larger strategy. Patricia's suspicion gradually morphed into smug satisfaction as she interpreted my involvement as acceptance, or even defeat. Behind the scenes, however, I hired a professional land surveyor to definitively mark the property boundaries according to the original deeds. The survey confirmed what we had discovered. The access road was entirely on my property, and I held legal rights to the critical connection point that served as the only entrance to Oak Ridge. Sarah worked diligently to file the appropriate documentation with the county, officially clarifying the easement rights in public records without drawing attention to our actions. As expected, the HOA sent formal notification about the electronic gate installation scheduled to begin in 30 days. The accompanying updated access regulations revealed their strategy. Each household would receive only 2 access cards, with additional cards available for a processing fee of $100 each. Most significantly, agricultural vehicles like my tractor would require special permits and could only access the road during limited hours. The restrictions were clearly designed to make my daily life increasingly difficult, creating pressure to sell. These new rules would take effect once the gate was operational, estimated at 6 to 8 weeks from the installation start date. Rather than object to the gate itself, I took a different approach. At the next HOA meeting, I publicly expressed support for enhanced community security and even offered to contribute to the security fund. The stunned silence that followed my announcement was worth every penny of the $500 check I wrote on the spot. Patricia's momentary confusion quickly transformed into triumphant satisfaction as she accepted my contribution, clearly believing she had won. "Your community spirit is appreciated, Ethan," she announced to the room, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "This kind of cooperation makes Oak Ridge the special place that it is." As I drove home that evening, I couldn't help smiling at the irony. Patricia thought she was tightening a noose around my property, never suspecting that she was actually walking into a trap of my own design. The gate installation began 2 weeks later. I observed the process from a distance, taking notes on the technical specifications and placement. They were installing a substantial system, a decorative iron gate with electronic controls, key card readers, and an intercom system connected to a guardhouse that would be staffed during peak hours. 3 weeks after the gate became operational, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a formal offer to purchase my ranch at what they termed a fair market value, approximately 30% below actual market rate. The letter cited community development needs and infrastructure compatibility requirements as justifications for the offer, concluding with a thinly veiled threat. Failure to work cooperatively with community development plans may result in increased access restrictions and potential legal actions regarding code compliance issues. That night, I called Sarah and Dave to my ranch. Over coffee at my kitchen table, we reviewed all the evidence we had collected: the discriminatory access restrictions, the documented code violations, the recorded conversations, and now the coercive purchase offer. "They've given us everything we need," Sarah said, reviewing the certified letter. "This explicitly connects the access restrictions to their attempt to force a sale. It's textbook coercion." After 3 weeks of escalating harassment and restriction, I had compiled overwhelming evidence of discriminatory treatment and improper use of HOA authority. The electronic gate that Patricia had envisioned as a tool to control and ultimately remove me had instead become the centerpiece of my counter-strategy. The following morning, I requested an emergency meeting with the HOA board, citing urgent access issues affecting resident safety. Patricia agreed with evident reluctance. When the confrontation finally came, it was more satisfying than I could have imagined. With Sarah by my side, I revealed the truth. I owned the access road. Every document confirmed it. The gate they had installed on my property without proper permits was illegal, and their discriminatory access policies were documented violations of multiple laws. The look on Patricia's face as her carefully constructed world collapsed around her was priceless. By that evening, county officials had shut down the gate system, and new signs declared the road private property with public easement, maintained by Westbrook Ranch. Within a week, Patricia was removed as HOA president. Veritech withdrew their development plans, and the community learned just how close they had come to losing their neighborhood to commercial development. 6 months later, the transformation was remarkable. Under new leadership, Oak Ridge had become the kind of community I'd always hoped for. The electronic gate was replaced with a simple, attractive entrance that remained open to all legitimate traffic. My ranch hosted monthly community gatherings in the barn that had stood empty since Elizabeth's passing. The vegetable garden, once cited as an eyesore, became a community project, with neighbors working together and sharing the harvest. Sometimes as I watch the sunset from my back porch, the view Elizabeth and I fell in love with, I think about how different things might have been. If I had given in to intimidation, if I had sold our dream, if I had walked away. But some things are worth fighting for. And sometimes the traps others set for us become the very means of our liberation. The gate they thought would lock me out had instead opened the door to something better than I could have imagined. A community where people stood together against manipulation and greed. A place where Elizabeth's memory lived on, not just in my heart, but in the connections we built together. In life's darkest moments, it's not about avoiding the trap, it's about transforming it into your strength. And that's what makes our stories truly unbreakable. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe to Unbreakable Tales for more stories of resilience that remind us of the power we all have within. Remember, sometimes what's meant to break you becomes the very thing that makes you unbreakable.